Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts, sports journalist David Todd, and from SteelersDepot.com, Dave Bryan. Just a couple of Daves, chillin', talking Steelers. Now, here's Dave and Dave.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Dave. He's Dave Bryan of SteelersDepot.com, a place to get your latest and greatest Steelers information. And I'm David Todd. It's Season 9, Episode 27. And it's almost, Dave, 9/27. It's actually September 26th, but I don't know that we've hit that ever before. Just noticed that. All right, enough of the pleasantries. We've had a chance to hear Mike and Ben and go through the tape, and the Steelers are 1-1-1, and they do have a big game. There's no doubt. You know, look, you can argue in the NFL, 16 games, every game's a big game, right? But a game against the Ravens on Sunday night at home at Heinz Field, a divisional game at 1-1-1 and the 2-1 Ravens, it's a big game, so it's a fun week. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing better than Chris Conte.
He's done.
Bless his heart.
Bitch slapped and he's finished.
Yeah, he got stiff-armed right out for the rest of the season, and I don't know if you saw the quick montage that Alex Kozora put together on.
Did a nice job by Alex, as always,
on Twitter there, but and I had to put that in context for him as well too, and I think I did it as only as I could with my ability to wordsmith there. If anybody missed that, but if you haven't seen it, Chris Conte cut the snot beat out of him in a total of 10. People need to remember that he was in the game for 10 plays before he was sent to the locker room by Vance McDonald. And Juju cracked him one time early in the game. Vance McDonald had a
Juju really got him. Juju, I haven't seen that. He really got him.
That might have been more than what hurt his knee or whatever. Then maybe the stiff arm, and then Vance got him on a stiff arm on the other side of the field, and then the stiff arm down the obviously on the touchdown there. But Chris Conte, I would purposefully miss that tape session as well too with the team. You don't want to make fun of a guy getting injured, absolutely not. But boy, it sure was a rough go of it for him in that game.
Yeah, we talked about it. I mean, that's going to be a highlight. One of the NFL Network shows, gave the award for the year. He's like, "Thanks for screwing up the show in week 3, Vance McDonald. Now this is going to be the winning play every week." So, as we talked about, that's getting posterized to put it in NBA terms, basketball terms, in a big way. You don't see it quite like that, and the hand of the head and the get him once, get him twice, and slap him down. Okay.
What did you think, about the play too? The isolation. Alex said he saw
interesting play design, right? I mean, 3 trips right, and then bring him out to the left. So he had single coverage, right?
Yeah. So you scheme. We talk a couple of times during this show about scheming for certain situations and hoping that you'll get a certain matchup, and they certainly got it on that side, and that's the kind of stuff. We go back. We've talked about Vance McDonald now. Since he was acquired, ahead of the 2017 season via the trade and all. That's the kind of stuff we've been kind of hoping for with him. It's just the injuries keep getting in the way. So, I mean, if he can stay, we gave him the nickname Vance if he can stay healthy. I mean, if he can, then he can have a career year without a doubt, because he's not, it's not daunting numbers if you look at what he's put up in his brief career here. So, if they keep these other guys like James Washington and Juju and of course AB and all on the field, then it's just going to make Vance McDonald that much more deadlier. And kind of getting into what Ben said during his radio show on, what is today, Tuesday, he talked about how, and I don't know how much you buy this, and I don't know if you listened to the whole thing, David, but the big talk right now is AB's catch rate being down, and his average yards per catch being down.
Yeah, no doubt. I tweeted when we were doing the show yesterday that in the top 50 receivers. In terms of yards, AB has the lowest yards per catch at 8.8 on one of only two guys under 10 yards per catch.
Now, I think you look at that. If you look, Ben tried to pawn off on us that I'm just not forcing the ball to him in certain situations, but yet AB still leads the team in total targets, right? With what I think it's 42. I'm trying to remember real quick here what his total targets are, but regardless. I thought that was just a polite way of Ben saying that we just haven't hooked up. He would have been better off just coming out and say, look, we just have not hooked up deep yet, because that's exactly what it is. Ben has targeted AB 10 times down the field so far this season and only connected on 2 of those throws. So 10 out of 42, that's a quarter of his throws right there. So that makes a big dent in not only your catch rate, but if you're not catching them past 15 yards down the field like AB has done quite a bit, well, that's obviously going to affect your average yards per catch as well too. So yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get at is I don't appreciate Ben trying to tell me that that he's just not trying to force the football to AB.
Yeah, look, we've seen it. He's a lot of the middle of the field has been the tight ends and Juju, and we've seen the drag routes, the crossing routes, whatever you want to call them. I mean, Juju's been found a lot of space in the middle of the field. We finally saw little James Washington. He found some space in the middle of the field. We haven't seen much of that of Antonio Brown. We've seen a lot of outs to the sideline. We've seen some wide receiver screens. Of course, again, that we talked about the touchdown. That's what you're looking for with Antonio Brown. You get single with the safety in the middle of the field, single high safety and single coverage on the outside. Just get it out there to him, and then that's his opportunity to make a play. And that corner was playing an 8 or 9 yard cushion. AB gets the catch. Then it's just beat your man and see if you get to the end zone before the safety can cut you off. And he did. And, those opportunities, it's only been 3 games. Those opportunities have been few and far between, and we'll see how they go, how they are going forward. But, the other side to point out is, the Cleveland secondary, it's open for debate how good the Cleveland defense is at this point. I think they're pretty good. Kansas City defense, not so good. I think, we're pretty clear on that. And Tampa secondary, not so good. So the Steelers have had some opportunities here, and they've, let's be clear, they've taken advantage of them. It just hasn't been the AB show. I mean, Juju, as we talked about on Tuesday, he's whatever he is. He's, 3rd or 4th in the league in yardage. The tight ends the past 2 weeks have both, combined. They've, each of them had a 100-yard receiving game. So it's not like the offense isn't flourishing points-wise. We can talk about the second half again, but they've been able to be productive without Antonio Brown putting up numbers like he has in the past. But again, let's not, we talk about 50 yards and a touchdown on 6 catches, or roughly what he had on Monday night as being quiet night for AB. Over the course of a season, that's 96 catches and 16 touchdowns. It's probably not, you get the numbers. It's those are big numbers. So, it's just not 1,500 yards.
42 targets on the season, 24 receptions. Only Adam Thielen, I think, from the Vikings has more targets than AB does at 44. So, they asked Ben, "Are you concerned?" Or they asked Tomlin, "Is he concerned?" And they both gave the correct answer, no.
What would you be concerned about? I mean, I had people, somebody said on Twitter yesterday, is anybody going to write the article about him not looking explosive or whatever? It's like, I'm not going to write it because I'm not seeing that. I mean, you look at the touchdown he scored. He's, is he 100%? I don't know that he's 100%, but it's certainly, it is not a deterioration of skills that have led to his, numbers being down a little bit. I think it's more the continued emergence of Juju, the tight ends, and as Mike says, rightly so every week, people spend a lot of time over the summer thinking about how to stop this guy because that might stop the Steelers' offense. Okay.
How about the quarterback throwing the football? How about can we point our finger at him a little bit? How many times has Ben thrown the ball out of bounds in the direction of AB?
Sure. We talked about the one on Monday night. He missed him down the right sideline. Certainly in week one, Ben just had a bad day. I mean, he threw 5 interceptions. So, but Ben's played awfully well in the last 6 quarters. So that, not going to put too much of it on Ben, but yeah, he hasn't hit on a deep ball, and he hit on 1 or 2 deep balls in the first 3 games, and we're not having this conversation.
Right, and no, this is not a bash Ben session, but 9 of 25, and actually I think if you count a few of the end zone throws and get the correct distances on those, I think it's more like 9 of 28. On balls of thrown more than 15 yards down the field. So he's got to, we already said that 10 of those throws went to AB, so nearly half of his deep throws have gone to AB, and only 2 of those have been complete. So Ben needs to tighten up this deep ball a little bit, and as soon as he does, these AB average yards per catch numbers will come in line, and you would think that the catch rate's going to come in line too. It's still way early on that. So no, not concerned on any of that. But and look, you want to talk about being able to get AB a little bit freer at times. You hit a couple times down the field to James Washington and Juju deep. That's going to loosen things up a little bit more on top of it. So all of it goes hand in hand here.
Well, one of the things that might be interesting to watch a little bit Sunday night is Juju's been incredibly effective out of the slot. They haven't moved AB around virtually at all. But we'll see if they say, okay, let's run Juju out of the slot on occasion, AB in the slot. Let's just put him in motion, run him in the slot. Just do a couple things, maybe just to, change things up a little bit now that you're 3 weeks in. Maybe the film study shows a certain thing, and you don't want to be, you don't want self-study and your tendencies of what people are seeing. So it would be that, that's something to pay attention to on Sunday night when Steelers are back on national TV. Dave, let's get to the injury report. We'll get into what Mike had to say yesterday.
Yeah, and we're still kind of waiting to see what the prognosis of Mike Hilton's going to be. Mike Hilton, well, immediately after the game, Mike Tomlin called it a significant elbow injury, but that Mike Hilton was being evaluated. Mike Hilton said in the locker room after the game that he thought it was in a hyperextended elbow, that he thought he might be able to play against the Baltimore Ravens. And then you fast forward to Tuesday, Mike Tomlin says Mike Hilton's still being evaluated. So that's where we stand there. I sent it to Dr. Mel. And she hopefully is going to have something written up in that in a little bit. A few other online doctors apparently have chimed in on it, thinking it could be this tear or whatever. We don't know, and we're going to have to see what the practice report on Wednesday says about all that. And I don't think we're going to be able to paint a better picture maybe about Mike Hilton until Friday. Now
you're not going to paint with a broad brush, I'm sure.
No, and I'm not going to have
a bad joke on Mike Tomlin. That was a joke on Tomlin.
No, and I'm not going to eat popcorn while while not painting with that broad
I'll
brush.
tell you, when Hilton went down, the way he was, how we've seen people, you watch football, you see these things happen over and over, and you draw conclusions, and it looked like maybe Mike Hilton, separated his shoulder, broke his collarbone. You see guys, holding their arm down at their side, and then you get to report, maybe it's a broken elbow. If he's still being evaluated, the best thing I can tell you is it means he probably didn't break something, because if it was a clean break of something, that would have been diagnosed pretty quickly Monday and probably told. So hopefully, ideally, you want the best answer. I think a hyperextended elbow would be the best answer you could get. And then just the decision, is that a 1 or 2 week injury, or, can he play? If it's something more than that, then he's obviously going to miss some time.
Yeah, and we shall see. I'm not even going to see. I put the slowed down, zoomed in GIF of that up on my Twitter machine feed as well too, and we'll see what Dr. Mel has to say about it here in the next day or two. Mike Tomlin also talked about the three guys that missed the game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with injuries. Those three being Morgan Burnett with a groin, David DeCastro with a hand, and Marcus Gilbert with a hamstring. He says all three have a legitimate chance to participate in this game, and as we always do, their practice participation will be our guide in terms of their availability. Look, I mean, DeCastro with that hand, been out since week 1. We'll see. Gilbert with the hamstring. Remember that Gilbert missed quite a few games at the start of last season because of that hamstring. I'm not sure you want to rush Marcus Gilbert back if you don't have to. So we'll see there. Morgan Burnett, groins. I'll speculate about a groin here. He missed some time during camp and the preseason there, so I wouldn't be shocked if he sat with this one out too. These soft tissue injuries in the early part of the season sure can scare you at times. I guess what I'm trying to say is maybe I'm most optimistic about the team maybe getting David DeCastro back this week of those three.
Yeah, we're guessing on DeCastro, obviously, because he said, you just keep going you go to PT and rehab, and you hope it's getting better, and one day they say you can go. So no idea. I'm guessing DeCastro might be a 6-week injury with the broken hand to allow that to fully heal. If it's a break of a bone, generally that takes a longer time. So I could see him being on the backside of the bye. Missing this week, and then, the Falcons and the Bengals, and then the bye week. So, it wouldn't surprise me if he were out for an extended period of time, if they were going to let that break heal fully. Hamstrings, we've talked about it. We talk about it all the time. 1 to 4 week injuries, if they're not, really massive, tears of the hamstring. Hayden was able to make it back in a week. He was out there running around before the game against the Chiefs and then didn't go. So you felt pretty good about his availability. Gilbert's availability, I will tell you, it's Wednesday. I'll pretty much call it the way we've called this all the time. If he's able to go full today and able to practice Thursday, then he goes. If he's limited today, then he probably doesn't end up going on Sunday. I mean, it's generally how those things work. If you can't, they're not going to, they're not going to have him go all out on Friday if he hasn't practiced 2 days before and put him out there. So again, just, we're not going on anything other than the history of doing, watching games and watching injury reports for 30 plus years and seeing how they react. So we'll see. I'm with you. We'll play it by ear. And this game, we're going to have John, of course, Wednesday. We're back on our Wednesday schedule the last 2 weeks in terms of getting our guys, our beat reporters, Adam Teicher and Dave, who was our the guy from The Athletic that we had from the Bucks on Friday. Our last two guys.
Greg Allman.
Greg Allman. Both those guys, excellent job. We had them on Fridays, though, because of scheduling conflicts. We will have our man John Eisenberg, who has a new book out, is going to join us a little bit later in this show as we're back into previewing the Ravens. Okay, so other topics from Mike Tomlin. The Le'Veon Bell situation, there's no new news. We've covered this ad nauseum in terms of, how a trade could work, what makes sense. I think, there are no new details here. This is just the same information. And I think you can pretty much, unless we get a breaking news story that Le'Veon Bell's been traded, this is a story, like Mike Tomlin said, he doesn't want to talk about it. This is a story where nothing's going to change until week 8 or week 9, when people start looking at the calendar and looking at when he has to report to, get credit, service time credit for the 2018 season. So, I don't have anything to add on that front, Dave. I mean, we've talked about the trade stuff. I think it's all out there. There's not new news. Mike Tomlin said he doesn't want to talk about him. Is there anything to say? Is there anything to say about Le'Veon Bell that we haven't covered?
No, there's really not, other than all these trade reports or whatnot are obviously going to instantly bring. Look, it does wonders for quick boost of traffic to Steelers Depot whenever there's the Jets inquired about the trade or this, that, and the other. But the fact of the matter is, it makes you wonder at times. It really does, David. It makes you wonder how much of this is fabricated.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of fabricated, do you mean in terms of people just talking about trade rumors and things like that? The Jets
Right,
having interest?
right. Jets have interest in trading, but they haven't made any firm offer. I mean, what kind of report is that? I mean,
Well, right, but I mean, look, if every team in the NFL, if they, should have called Kevin Colbert and just said, "Hey, if you're looking to dump him, we're interested. Keep us in mind." I mean, that's just doing your homework. That's just doing what your job as GM or assistant GM is, just to let them know if you actually decide that you're going to move this guy, please let us know because we're interested and we'll make an offer. So, look, it's midweek stuff. Teams got to write, beat writers got to write about 32 different teams and keep things going. They're looking for stories that make sense. You can only write about Chris Conte going on the IR for about 5 seconds. Le'Veon Bell's a bigger story.
right, right. Now here's the thing. I still this comes from me who thought there was no way they were going to be able to trade Martavis Bryant for a third-round pick. And I think we see why nobody should have traded a third-round pick for Martavis Bryant and why I was so animate in thinking that it couldn't be done. I mean, it only takes one, as the saying goes, and kudos for Kevin Colbert for being able to pull such a magic trick off in that. But, when it comes to Le'Veon Bell, what is the motivation for Le'Veon Bell to get himself traded right now? I mean, legitimately, people say, well, you can nudge, wink, wink, backroom deal to have something put in place after the season is over. How much? I mean, give me a break. He's much better off. If he's going to play for a team this year, he's much better off playing for the Steelers. Am I correct?
I don't know. I mean, versus whom? Versus the Dolphins? Versus
does he really want to risk his running style not being behind maybe a little less inferior line and him putting up a little bit, some unsavory numbers in 5 games or 6 games or whatever to close out the season? And on top of it, if a team did trade for him, you're not just going to play him 50% of the snaps. You're going to play him 98% of the snaps. You're going to give him the workload that he should have had, or that he's had in the past with the Steelers there. So I just don't see how it benefits Le'Veon Bell to show up at least, prior to the deadline to get himself traded. I just don't see where the benefit is on him. Now, you can make an argument of why he should report right before the deadline, and that's just from the sheer fact that, look, he doesn't need it he does not need the here's the misnomer that so many people still continue to get wrong. He does not need the accrued season just to get the free agency. That is wrong. He needs this season so that the Steelers cannot tag him at that same $14 million mark that the next tag has to be the quarterback tag amount of $25 million. Okay, that's where he needs to think about if he wants a season. Now, he could gamble and say there's no way the Steelers are going to tag me at $14.544 million and go through this again. But I think it would behoove him to at least get in and play, to close out the season, because do you really want to sit out a full season and then go into free agency? I mean, you go back to the argument of it only takes one team to overpay you, but how good would it look for a running back to sit out a whole season?
That's been my argument all the time. I think Le'Veon Bell's past the tipping point of where this, and I don't want to talk about this too much longer because everybody's probably bored of hearing it and I'm bored of talking about it. But I think he's past the tipping point. If he doesn't come in this week, he's now at about $3.4 million that he is. It's not he forfeited. He didn't earn because he never signed a contract. So that money's just going into the Steelers bank account or staying in the Steelers bank account. It could be used next year. And, you can talk about this. If the Steelers come out of the first 9 games at, 6-3-1, You say, what was the cost of Le'Veon Bell sitting out? You say, no cost. We, saved $8 million or whatever the number turns out to be. And there may be some benefit to that. And how much better would the Steelers be with Le'Veon Bell than James Conner? Probably a little bit. But James Conner's done what he's needed to do. He certainly, and let's be clear, James Conner's fumble in week 1 was a significant factor in the Steelers' tie, as was his success in the first half of that game and the third quarter of that game. Played a much smaller role in week 2 because the Steelers got behind and they had to throw it every down. But Steelers are where they are, and I do think the Steelers are. I certainly think Mike Tomlin, Randy Fichtner, Kevin Colbert, Art Rooney, they are not thinking about Le'Veon Bell. They are operating as if Le'Veon Bell won't be part of the team for the rest of the season. And deal with it when the situation changes. Deal with it at that point in time.
Yeah, and look, I still maintain the best time for Le'Veon Bell to come in is during the bye week because A, he gets paid during the bye week. B, he'll have the 2 weeks to get himself, quote unquote, back in football shape and catch up with the offensive changes and everything like that. And then he would have really effectively missed half of the season and saved some of the wear and tear on him. And then he can still kind of contribute for a stretch run. And they've had enough time to get James Conner up to speed that maybe, just maybe, that leads to Le'Veon Bell coming off the field a little bit more than maybe usual as well too. So I think to me the best time for him to report would be the bye week, but obviously there's no guarantee that's going to happen.
It's a good idea. And let's note that Randy finally got Stephen Ridley in there a little bit, and Stephen Ridley acquitted himself quite well. A couple carries, ran the ball hard, and good to see. We have not seen. Let's talk a second about kind of rookies and with the production we've gotten out of the rookies at this point in the season. Obviously Mason Rudolph, we know where that status is. And, I don't know if that's going to change the entire year. He may not dress. He may be the number 3 guy the entire year. And then, the situation will be next year, if that's the case, he's going to have to beat Josh Dobbs out. Now, I think everybody expects that to happen. And if you had your crystal ball and could draw up the future plans, you'd have him develop just like Pat Mahomes. And Ben sticks around till, they think that Mason Rudolph's the guy or Ben isn't the guy, and then you got your next Pat Mahomes. But that's one. Jason Samuels, we haven't seen him do much to this point in time. He's been active, but he has yet to get a carry. He's played a little bit of special teams. I think he got 6 snaps in this past game. Marcus Allen was down. Your boy Matthew Thomas isn't getting any snaps. He's just only getting special team snaps so far. So, the Steelers and Chooks is getting some run as the tackle eligible type of guy. And we've seen, the number 1 and the number 2 pick are the guys who are contributing. I mean, obviously Edmonds getting a start and Washington building into the role. So you've got 2 guys now two of the rookies to this point in time now, being contributors, right? Did I leave anybody out? I think I covered all the.
Yeah. And Marcus Allen's been inactive every week. And, you mentioned Jalen. Look, it's not surprising that Jalen Samuel's just having to work on special teams right now. Not a surprise at all there. James Conner, look, 352 total yards from scrimmage right now on 69 total touches. He's averaging 5.10 yards per touch. You go back and not a fair comparison. Le'Veon Bell missed last year's preseason and training camp, yada yada. Le'Veon Bell averaged 3.36 yards per touch in the Steelers' first 3 games. Now, the fourth game last year was a big one for Le'Veon Bell. That's really where he had a strong showing last year was week 4, and I think wasn't that one also against the Ravens as well too, David? And this is the week that you really probably gonna hopefully not see a big difference between Le'Veon Bell and James Conner. Let's see. Last year, week 4, Le'Veon Bell rushed for 144 yards on 35 carries. You want to talk about a guy getting a workload? Le'Veon Bell got it in that game. 2 touchdowns, 144 yards on 35 carries. He also had 4 receptions for 42 yards. So he had, 186 yards from scrimmage in that game. So there you go, James Conner. That's kind of your target when it comes to this game, and we'll find out. I mean, look, James Conner has. I mean, who did you really think James Conner would have 15 catches at this point of the season, David, and be averaging, over 5 yards per touch?
Well, Ben set a record for pass attempts in the first 3 weeks of the season, not a Steeler record, an NFL record. So, they're going to throw to their backs, whoever the back may be. So I'm not, hey, look, I think Bell had 85 catches last year. Connor's on pace for 80. Bell averaged 7.8 yards, I think, per catch last year. Connor's averaging a little bit higher than that. So, you can make an argument that, and this was my argument all along about not tagging or signing Le'Veon Bell for. They made the comment, James Conner's making $600,000 this season, and Le'Veon Bell's foregoing $853,000 each week. So I said you can get 90% of the production of Le'Veon Bell for, I said half the cost when you go out and sign somebody else and, draft somebody at a higher pick. I still believe that's the case. That's why you don't pay a running back $14.5 million. Or $60 million, or whatever the number is. Doesn't mean Le'Veon Bell's not a good player. So I think we're starting to see that kind of play out so far this year, but we'll have to see it play out for an entire season. See if that's how it goes.
As we said all along, this team can win with James Conner. I mean, you obviously would like to have a guy like Le'Veon Bell if you can have him, but it's not a prerequisite of winning a Super Bowl or going deep into the playoffs if you have him. So we'll leave it at that. Before we come up for air here, Ben Roethlisberger has been named the AFC Offensive Player of the Week. What do you have? 353 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and 30 total completions against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So AFC Offensive Player of the Week. And when we come back on the other side from this quick ad, David, I want to talk about how B.J. Finney and Matt Filer have filled in Monday night on the offensive line.
Okay, so Dave, you mentioned Ben, Offensive Player of the Week. One of the interesting things, and we're still stats tell us some things, and one of the things that I was a little surprised is looking at Ben's QBR that in this game that we just saw, and certainly you look at Ryan Fitzpatrick and what Ben did, and you say, well, Fitzpatrick obviously threw 3 interceptions. And, that team, but he brought him back in the second half and he put up 411 yards and he did throw for 3 touchdowns. I would have thought he had a reasonable QBR. I would have guessed his QBR would have been, maybe up in the 60s or something like that. And it wasn't. It was, to me, it was shockingly low. I'm just pulling it up now. I think it was in the 35 for Fitzpatrick. And then at the same time, I thought Ben's numbers would have put him, a little higher than they did. So Fitzpatrick was 36.4 with a passer rating of 81.3. Obviously, heavily influenced by the 3 interceptions. Ben's passer rating was 120.7, which is a really, that will rank in the top 10% of Ben's career games. You get games under over 100, and Ben's kind of put up his best seasons in the 90s and 100s. So games over 100 probably are 25% of his games. Games over 120, you were talking about elite games. But his QBR was only 66.2. And again, there's time of the game, things that happen at different points. The interception and the fumble, of course, impacted Ben's overall rating. But again, it's one of those. I think QBR it's become a better stat to look at things than passer rating, but sometimes still makes me scratch my head a little bit.
Yeah, and I think when you look at Fitzpatrick, it really makes you scratch your head because you can't just use the stats alone to come up with a grade.
Yeah, it's hard to contextualize. They contextualize the game situation, but you can't contextualize Mike Evans breaking off a route or, a ball dinking off, it's still, Fitzpatrick threw the ball, so that hit off Bostic's helmet. But,
right, but the tackle not blocking out instead of blocking inside,
Yeah, quarterback eats it.
The quarterback's the one that has to make something happen there. And then, the pick six, if you go back and slow that down, Big Dan does a good job of getting up through there and kind of, affecting that throw, if you will. Now, should Fitzpatrick have just thrown it away? I mean, if he throws that ball away, it helps his quarterback rating or his QBR. Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is we still have not reached peak quarterback evaluation scores yet when it comes to some of this, because a lot of it needs some subjectivity to it, right? Or contextualization, if you will, when it comes to it. Real quick on Fitzpatrick, there's no way you're not letting him continue to be the starter right now, right?
Absolutely. He is my starter for the time being. Of course, the short week this week, and then I think they get do they get the Thursday game next week or so? Something happens, but they have their bye coming up. So that will be the time. But if he, if they go out and play well this week and he has a good game, they got the Bears on the road. This will be a stern test against that defense. I think you can argue, the Bears with now Khalil Mack are probably maybe one of the 5 best defenses in the game. If they go out and if he goes out and lights them up, then he's your guy for the foreseeable future. If he has a disaster, well, then you look at the bye week and figure out when it makes sense. And I just want to repeat something I said. And I know there's this mantra about the Steelers, and they, not only they don't do this, they should never do this. I would just say one more time, if the Steelers had traded for Khalil Mack, I can't believe another team just didn't try to compete with what the Bears offered. Basically, let's just call it 2 first-round picks, because that's the gist of it. And there was some stuff on the back end that actually was in the Bears' favor. But when you give up your first-round pick and you're getting Khalil Mack, every team would make that trade. So the Steelers would trade the 21st or the 29th or the 32nd pick in the next year's NFL draft for Khalil Mack in a second, because you get Khalil Mack. You get a first-round top-of-the-draft player. So in my view, you're only giving up you're giving up a future first-rounder for Khalil Mack. Now, you have to pay him. That's a huge deal that, you don't get the benefit of the draft pick and the salary structure that comes with that. But, man, you put Khalil Mack on any defense in the NFL, and seeing what he's done these first 3 weeks, any defense would be markedly better. And you just wonder if the Steelers had a guy like Khalil Mack, if it would make their secondary better, Dave, and maybe the answer is no. I know we haven't really gotten back into the game yet and what happened at the right cornerback position, is those guys just didn't get it done, and Mike talked about it.
Yeah, and what did Bill Parcells always say when it comes to first-round draft picks? And he says you either get a quarterback, you get a guy that can protect the quarterback, or you get a guy that can get after the quarterback. That's where your first-round pick should be spent. Especially if you don't have one of those good 3 things. So in other words, if you don't have a quarterback, you should be drafting a quarterback. If you don't have a left tackle, which now in today's day and age, left, right tackle, it doesn't matter, because they're going to find the mismatch. So if you don't have 2 good tackles, you might want to think about getting a tackle. And then, you better get somebody who can beat those tackles and get after the quarterback there. So I know I joke a lot during the offseason about wanting the Steelers to draft 7 edge rushers, but it's no joking matter to me. And look, we knew they weren't going to trade for Khalil Mack. But
we say that because it's one of 32 teams and it's not their MO. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't have traded for Khalil Mack.
Right, I'm not saying that, but it just, there's certain things that I'd like to have that I just can't, but you just have to look at it that way. It would be nice to have, because he's such an impact player, because you're right. You don't even know sometimes spending a first round draft pick if you're going to get that kind of quality.
You might get Jones.
you just don't know what you're going to get with those situations. So yeah, if you have an opportunity and the price is, eatable, if you will, or affordable, then yeah, you go after that kind of thing. And look, we've seen how big of an impact he's made with the Bears and how he's going to continue to make an impact with the Bears too. And you have to pay those kind of guys that the money they're due. So, all right, enough about him. Back to Matt Filer and BJ Finney. Initially with the TV view, that's why I always say, man, you got to be careful with judging these things on the TV view, even through one or two times through. It didn't look as though Matt Filer had the best game. Now, I'm not going to go as far as Mike Tomlin on Tuesday. What did he say? Matt Filer was awesome.
He used a too big an adjective. Let's put it that way. He didn't say fantastic or awesome, but he had a very complimentary word.
He said, he said awesome job.
Awesome job, okay.
He said, I thought Matt did an awesome job. Thank you for mentioning that. I'd be remiss if I didn't. Not surprised by it. We don't take our contributions from our starters in waiting for granted. We expect those guys to perform well, but at the same time, we appreciate it. The All-22 was a lot more favorable for him, in my opinion. There's probably one of those sacks that you can kind of question about that, but I think one of those was a 4-second variety. He had a couple of pressures. Most of his bad tape was, I think, in the third quarter there with him. But
it's which was really just that one drive, and the other, you put up, I think you put up on the site the kind of dealing with the stunt, the two of them doing that seamlessly.
And they did that on back-to-back plays, by the way, too.
Yeah, and look, the Tampa line is not a bad line, just in terms of the guys on the line, McCoy and JPP, and so they're a little long in the tooth. But they're okay. But yeah, the Steelers needed to get something going there in that third quarter, and Ben was running a bit for his life in the third quarter. And again, it's the question of, is it good for Ben to hold on to the ball and try and make plays? And as you said on Tuesday, Dave, love to see him, ball get out of the hand on the first read. And does the first read have to be too open that he doesn't actually get it out of his hand, and then it becomes a little bit more sandlot ball?
So yeah, Matt Filer, a little bit better job than what I thought. I thought him and Finney worked fairly well together. Now the run blocking of those two guys probably could have been better. All right. No could have about it. It could have been better. You saw the team try to run to the left a little bit more instead of the right. Both Finney and Filer, I think Filer, when it comes to run blocking, I think I'd much rather have Filer at left guard. And when run blocking is involved with BJ Finney, I think I'd much rather have I'd much rather have Filer at right guard. And when it comes to run blocking with BJ Finney, I'd much rather have him at left guard. But I thought overall, when you go back through the tape on those two together, I thought they represented themselves well. So, I think the Steelers are blessed. Now, how much of that is people will say, well, it's because you have Mike Munchak there and Mike Munchak works this magic and whatnot. Look, you have to have some level of talent there to work with. So is it the evaluation of the guys that are good initially to think that you can get the bet? Is it a chicken and egg type thing situation here? Look, I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, the Steelers have a nice complement of backup offensive linemen and versatile offensive linemen at that, and we haven't really even seen Chooks do anything more than be a tackle eligible, and you would hope that Chooks has more upside to him than Matt Filer, and if we get later on into the season, that it'll actually be Okafor starting at right tackle or left tackle, God forbid, should the need ever arise.
Well, look, I think the lifespan of the left side of the Steelers line is not long. That's my view. And I know that contractually it doesn't necessarily tell you that. But Ramon's long in the tooth, and he's year to year for sure. And it would not at all surprise me if Filer's your starting left guard next year. And Alley's just not all that. He's a left tackle in the NFL, and God bless him for what he's done in his life and his career. But he is a marginal left tackle, and if Chooks were to take a massive step forward, from the practice, during his practice time this year, it's not impossible. Look, the Steelers have played Kelvin Beachum at left tackle. They're making these picks with an eye to getting better. And Gilbert's obviously getting a little, the line's been around together for a long time and been very successful over this period of time. Knock on wood, because, we talked about in the aughts, the Steelers could not stay healthy on the offensive line. And they've had a great run of health overall. Gilbert, missed a bunch of time last year, but Hubbard filled in seamlessly. But you've had a pretty good run. But it's just, to me, when I think about where this team is going to be, I would say I would think, well, Ramon Foster's not going to be the left guard in 2020. I don't think there's any chance of that. And I don't think the Steelers are going to be long with Ali Villanueva at the left side. I think they're looking for his replacement.
I think you're underselling Alejandro Villanueva. I really do. The tape, the worst part of his game right now is his run blocking.
Yeah, just look. Do you think he's one of the top? Do you think he's in the top half of the list?
I think he is a top. I think he's right at around 9, 10.
You think he's top third?
I think he's top third left tackles in the league.
Yeah, I wouldn't give him that. So we'll see. All right. So that was the line play. Anything else on the defense that we need to talk about in terms of schemes and what you saw? I mean, look, we talked about cover 3. You and I, before we got on the air, we talked about Artie. And it's kind of inexplicable, because Artie knows the reason Sensabaugh, part of the reason Sensabaugh got the opportunity to start this game and get time is not just because of what happened in the game against the Chiefs. It's because of what's been happening in practice as well. Artie's guys been getting behind him in practice. And Dave and I discussed this, we mentioned it briefly on Tuesday, is when you have a situation down in distance and game score, you have to understand what's being asked of you. And to get beat deep, have guys get behind you like Mike Evans did on a couple of occasions with Artie, late in the game where, the game's 30-10 at halftime, as we said, Dave, let's revert to the Dick LeBeau philosophy. Essentially, you may keep everything in front of you. And Artie didn't do that. And it's hard to, you can go back to his rookie year against the Bills, just looking into the backfield, going fake, getting beat on double moves. It's hard to have confidence. It's not that he doesn't have the physical skills. He's not playing the position right.
And unfortunately, you keep hearing Keith Butler say, when talking about defensive play at times, saying players trying to do too much at times, not playing the defense and trying to overcompensate for something else. And I think he is a key portion in that. David, that touchdown, how does that touchdown to Mike Evans happen when you have half coverage? You have half coverage on that side of the field, and you have one vertical route.
Yeah, it's one route, so Edmonds has to know to get there sooner.
No. I think Davis was the deep one on that.
Davis on that one? Okay, Davis on that one. Yeah, I mean, look, Artie, you can tell by the way, in one of them he gets beat on a double move, and the other one you can tell.
Well, that's that one. I mean, how do you let someone to your outside when you have inside
coverage?
When you have some inside help,
coverage, and you got safety help in the middle of the field.
And yeah, you could probably put a little bit. Look, if that's a true half coverage on that play, and there's one vertical route, what the hell is Sean Davis reading anyway? I mean, you've got one vertical to read. And
just so for people, Dave, don't always understand the terminology, it means the safety is going to help over the top on the back on that half of the field. That's Sean Davis's responsibility, and that's what Dave is talking about when Artie's playing that, and the guy shows the move inside. He knows that's where his help is, so he can't bite on that move inside with the help inside, because the only place that he potentially is going to get beat is over the top of him to the sideline. That's where he's in real danger.
And that's And that's what happened. But you could, look, we don't know what every call is on there, so we guess. I mean, it looks more like a quarter half, coverage in that situation. But I mean, it's definitely half coverage on that side of the field. It looks like there, and it makes you wonder, A, what the hell is Artie doing, biting up so hard up underneath on that kind of stutter move, and B, Sean Davis bought a ticket to it,
I keep waiting for Sean Davis to get better.
Look, it's his. I understand it's his first. He's played. You're starting to see why it's not good to have a guy play a new position every year. And I think this is one of the things that Alex Kozora was most concerned about with Sean Davis, with this move as well too. You brought his rookie season. He had to start off by learning the slot, right? Because of Sinquest Golson and all that kind of stuff. Then he played strong safety, and then now you move to free safety. Look, it's good to know all the positions on the field and where to line up and all, but that doesn't mean that you have to actually play all three positions. When it comes to that. So yeah, I mean, he's got good ability to get, the speed and the athletic ability to cover a lot of ground there. But I think a lot of it too, it sure looks like so far this season, there's a lot of him. You might as well you want to talk about popcorn. He's the one with popcorn in his hand watching the show.
Yeah.
At times.
And he's playing, a lot of times he's playing 25 yards off the ball, but then you can't get beat deep. I mean, if you're going to play, if you're out there going to be the center fielder, you can't have that happen. Hey, Dave, we got our boy John Eisenberg coming up, but I just want to make sure people know about MyBookie. And if you've been listening to the podcast, you've been hearing us talk about that. Who you're betting on and who you're betting with are equally important, man. You got to have a good service out there, and that's why Dave and I use mybookie.ag. They're the best bet this season. They've been in business for years, great reviews online, mobile site's easy to use. Just download it onto your phone, the app, the mobile site, whatever you want to get. And, they've been good to us, and that's why we're urging you to check it out. mybookie.ag. You win, they pay. They got in-game live betting. That's a new feature. When back in the day when we had quarters and pagers looking for the score and quarters to get on the pay phones, you never had live game in betting because you just physically couldn't do it. Now it's so easy with things on the, what you can do with your phones. Over-unders on fantasy points. And by the way, I have some in-game strategies on that, Dave. I have some thoughts on that. I don't know if you're ever an in-game guy, but if you're watching games, if you get a good place to watch games, if you ever go to a sports bar, if you're in Vegas in a thing, I think you can watch games and watch trends, and you can get on those in-game things and take advantage of it. Certainly in college games, that's the case. But they got all sorts of perks, as we say, on the fantasy stuff as well. But they've been slammed with new bettors. So they're offering this $25 free play on deposits over $100, but you have to deposit after 7 p.m. Eastern time. And MyBookie will match that. If you join now, we told you about matching the initial deposit up to $1,000, dollar for dollar. For that one, you got to use the promo code TERRIBLE. And for the 25 free play on deposits over 100 when you're depositing, not opening a new account, use the promo code TERRIBLE25. So check it out today. MyBookie, MyBookie.ag. After 7 p.m. for the 25 free play, Terrible 25. Terrible for the initial deposit, up to $1,000 being matched. You play, you win, you get paid. All right. My man John Eisenberg, should we get to him, talk a little Ravens?
Do it.
All right, welcome back, and we're back on our Wednesday schedule, having a beat writer for the opposing team, and it's of course the hated Ravens coming into Heinz Field on Sunday night as the Steelers are back on a night game in prime time. And the Steelers-Ravens, everybody knows the deal. I think I saw a stat that maybe Matt Williamson put out, or one of the guys in Vegas put out, the last 24 matchups. I think 12-12 straight up, 12-12 against the spread, points scored, about a 2-point differential. It has been this way. We talk about it all the time. All the games, what the percentage of the games decided by 3 points or less over the years has been something like 80%. It's crazy. but not just Steelers Ravens. It means we get our buddy John Eisenberg back joining us. And of course, John's been with us. Yeah, it feels like John's been with us forever. You can find his work. He's a Ravens columnist. You can find Baltimore.com and JohnEisenberg.com. John, as always, thanks for being back with Dave and I.
It is always great to be with you guys. Some of my favorite appearances coming on with you guys.
So, John, new book, and we've been looking forward to this. And for our listeners, this is coming out, I think, October 9th. You can pre-order it at all the various places. It's called The League: How 5 Rivals Created the NFL and Launched a Sports Empire. And if you've been with us through the years, you know that John's written a ton of books. He's got, he goes back to the baseball stuff with the streak on Cal Ripken's record. There's the football book that focuses on some of the things that happened down in Texas. But John, this one, I'm psyched to read this. We've already talked about it a little bit. And our listeners obviously love football and love the history of football, but there's obviously a big Steelers flavor to this one as well.
Yes, what I've done with this book, The League, is I wrote about the early days of the NFL, but not really the leatherhead players. I wrote about the owners, the guys that sort of shepherded the league, that kept it going, pretty much got it started and kept it going. And when it was really a failing enterprise, for the first 20 or 30 years, the NFL was not in good shape. It was a fourth-rate league, sort of slapdash put together, lost money, franchises folded, and it's pretty incredible. So these guys, and of course they're all now famous guys in the Hall of Fame. How did they keep it going? And the 5 guys I picked, Art Rooney Sr. is one of them, very obviously, as anyone who knows NFL history knows. He was just a key figure. So there's a ton of stuff about the early Steelers. What I've done, other things have been written about Art, and I'm aware because he's such a famous figure. But what this does, I've really sort of put him in context, how he operated with Burt Bell, his closest friend, who started the Philadelphia Eagles and wound up being commissioner, how he operated with George Halas, George Preston Marshall, Tim Mara, the guy that started the Giants. These guys were all sort of, they were bookies and gamblers and sort of,
right.
And so, it's crazy time in the NFL, and Art Rooney was in the middle of it. So what I've done is really told the story of those years.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to it, and our listeners, like I said, they can pre-order it now, but they can find it online and ready to go early October, right?
Yes, October 9th. Yes, and it's available everywhere. It's a good publisher out of New York, and it can be pre-ordered, and there's just a ton of Pittsburgh stuff in there. I really enjoy getting into it, so hopefully the listeners will find it interesting.
And listeners, John's been on the show and been a great contributor to this show for several years now. So it'd be a great payback, a great trade-off, if you will, if you do get this book. It'll mean a lot to John and mean a lot to us as well too. And I look forward to reading it as well. Okay, John.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Let's get into it. Steelers, Ravens, and all the good things that come with that. The Ravens go out and get Lamar Jackson, and certainly he appears to be the quarterback of the future, and some thought maybe he would be the quarterback of the very near future. We've seen this team with a rebuilt receiving core, not a new receiving core, but a rebuilt receiving core, seemingly a bit of a rejuvenated Joe Flacco. Where do the Ravens stand offensively after, some years of struggles with Flacco's overall performance and an aging receiver core? What do you think of the Ravens' offense so far?
I think it's upgraded. It looks better. It is really the first time in a few years where you sense some energy and a lot of positive things going on with the Ravens' offense. Much more formidable than it's been the last few years. The most important piece being Flacco, for sure, and he's really healthy for the first time in a while. He tore up his knee in 2015. He missed all of training camp, the preseason last year with a bad back, and got better as the year went on, but was never really just mobile and chucking it around as he can do. So really from the get-go this year in the spring, it has been clear that Flacco is in a different place. Now, the drafting of Jackson may have, changed his mindset a little bit. It certainly got his attention. But from the get-go, the idea that there was a quarterback competition here was sort of very interesting. And of course, when you pick a guy in the first round, you're making a statement. But from the start of OTAs, it was very clear that Joe was still the quarterback here. There was a lot of talk about it sort of outside of Baltimore. But for the people that were at practice every day and in the camps and everything, there was no doubt Joe was just in a better place than he had been, throwing some beautiful passes and just on target. So, that's the key piece of the puzzle for sure. He just looks a whole lot better. And they've surrounded him with some pretty good playmakers. I mean, Ozzie Newsome has had some hits and misses, a lot more hits than misses over the years. Some misses lately in terms of personnel. I think he might have some hits with some of these receivers he's brought in. Michael Crabtree looks like he can still play. Smokey Brown, John Brown was a guy who had a down year in Arizona, but just tremendously talented, small but fast, and he has been very explosive. Willie Snead was coming off a bad year in New Orleans, and they got him at a bargain price, and he's the slot guy. And they're all performing with Joe, and so it just gives the offense just a lot. They're a lot more explosive than they were a year ago.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of Willie Snead. And you always wonder, guys coming out of that system in New Orleans, how much of it is the system and Drew Brees and how much is the receiver. Crabtree, we've seen, it seems like he's the kind of continuation of these contested catch guys from Anquan Bolden on, Steve Smith. They continue to find these guys in the second half of their career who are good guys, quality players who can do that type of stuff. So, yeah, I was kind of excited for what they've done here early in the season. But let me ask you this, John, having seen them and had your perception of what they were going to be before the week 1 game with the Bills, and they obviously, whitewashed the Bills, but from your thought about what you thought going into the season and what you think right now, has it changed?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the pieces have come together a little bit more quickly than I thought. And what's changed, here's what's changed. The Ravens will always tell you, we are a running team. That's our history. It's AFC North football. We've got to run the ball. They still sort of cling to that. And they haven't passed the ball well enough in recent years for them to be anything else. I mean, they had Alex Collins sort of come out of nowhere last year and almost made 1,000 yards. They have Buck Allen as a real solid number 2. And so they I think they envision themselves as a running team, certainly in line with the league pass run balance, which these days is 55-45, something like that. But and teams are still playing them that way. They're stacking the box. There's all these sort of analytics that show you the Ravens are still facing more defenders in the box than any team. Teams are playing them that way. And so I don't think they're going to be playing them that way much longer, because what they're doing is they're daring Flacco to beat them. And that's the Flacco that has been in the last few years in the offense, which certainly that was probably a winning strategy against the Ravens. I'm not sure it is this year. Buffalo dared them to do it, and they just completely tore them apart. Cincinnati did a good job in week 2. Cincinnati has the Ravens number and has for a couple of years. Marvin Lewis plays them well. And Denver did the same thing this past weekend. And again, Flacco had a real strong day. So I think you're going to see more passing from the Ravens. It's almost, John Harbaugh had a comment after the game. He said, you got to let Marty be Marty, being Marty Morningwig, the offensive coordinator, who does like to throw the ball. I think this is going to be a passing-based offense this year more than a running-based offense. So I think that's what's changing. And whether opponents adapt to that and how they start to play remains to be seen. I do think they're going to start playing the Ravens differently here pretty soon, because they are passing the ball more.
Kind of a similar, David sort of got in on what I wanted to ask to start off, but I'm going to phrase it a little bit different. What has been the most surprising aspect about the Ravens in these first 3 games?
I would say the depth. The most surprising thing is the depth that they've shown on defense. In particular, they played that Denver game. They didn't have C.J. Mosley. They didn't have Jimmy Smith. They didn't have Willie Henry. They're lacking. Got Michael Pierce, sort of their big mountain in the middle. That's four guys that they projected as starters in training camp, and certainly Mosley, Smith, no doubt they are, and Michael Pierce. So that is a situation where in the last few years where the Ravens would lose guys. Certainly when Brandon Williams went out last year, the run defense just fell apart. When Jimmy Smith went out, the pass defense just fell apart. So they have really struggled without their mainstay. So this year, I mean, they're playing without those guys. They've been playing without Smith since the beginning of the year. And right now they're number one defense in the league in terms of yards allowed, fewest yards allowed. So they have more guys to throw in, more quality guys. And I think you're seeing that the depth that they have is a new thing here, and it's improved.
Mark Andrews, their young tight end out of Oklahoma, was fun to watch his college tape during the offseason and all, and it appears as though they're not letting him drink out of the same water fountain as the other tight ends so far, so hopefully they're able to keep him healthy. Mark Bavaro, the comparisons have already started to come up with him and all. Yeah, I mean, is he the real deal? I mean, he certainly looks like it in the first few games here. And, talk about the other tight ends of health. I know Hayden Hurst is dealing with something. I think Max Williams, banged up again there. Talk about Mark Andrews and then really the overall health of the Ravens entering this week.
Andrews is definitely off to a real nice start. Flacco, of course, loves to throw to tight ends, and the Ravens have put a lot of time and effort into enabling him to do that. They didn't have any downfield tight ends last year. Nobody really that could get down the field, and they still have Max Williams and Nick Boyle. Max, they're sort of more rumbling, short yardage guys. Andrews is just a different cut entirely. He's a downfield guy, and he's already got, I think, at least 3 this year. Had 2 against Denver, down the middle of the field, deeper than Dennis Pitta got, by the way. They just haven't had a guy that can get that deep as a tight end. But honestly, they're more excited about Hurst than anybody. Until Hurst got hurt, they were really disappointed that he hurt his foot, and he's supposed to practice this week, so we'll see whether he's back. But Flacco just loved throwing to him in practice in the preseason. He's an interesting target that they brought in here. His first-round pick, and they think he'll really be a playmaker for him. So they're anxious to get him back and really line those two guys up together.
What about the health of the what's the injury report going to look like when it comes out today?
The injury report is, I think they're in a decent place. I mean, nothing along the offensive line that I'm aware of, unlike last year where by this time they were already down. Marshall Yonda was out for the year. Alex Lewis was out for the year. They really early in the season dealt with major problems on the offensive line last year. They're healthy there this year. Max Williams may be on there, and the main guy to watch is Mosley. And let's see where he is. He actually was on the practice field one day last week. And there's some thought that he might be able to play Sunday. We'll see about that. That'll be an ongoing storyline all week. But that's the main guy on there, and we'll this just remains to be seen.
David.
Sorry, John. I had my mute button on. Just to stay on the tight end situation for half a second here. I'm trying to remember around draft day. Okay, I just wasn't focusing on it. We know Max Williams hasn't necessarily been exactly what they expected of him, been banged up. But they had Max Williams, and they go get Hurst, and then they go get Andrews, who was probably, they were surprised to see him on the board there in the 3rd round. What was the thinking of taking 2 guys? Look, they brought in wide receivers, so they filled in nicely, and they had kind of the luxury of doing this, but you could argue they had needs other places when you go tight end in the 1st round. What was the thinking of taking both these guys?
Well, they traded back twice before they took Hurst. They could have taken receivers. There was a lot of thought here. Of course, Brashad Perriman being just a bust, it was like they need a young receiver to blend into that. But they had signed those free agents, and they felt pretty good there. And tight end, as I said, Joe has long loved throwing to tight end, just didn't have that at all. So they wind up with Hurst, and that was fine. But yes, to go back into it, they've actually done it before. They did it in was it 2011, I think, with Ed Dixon and Dennis Pitta. They have taken two tight ends in the same year before, and it's a tight end heavy offense. I mean, there's two on the field a lot.
Well, they took Williams and Boyle, right, in 15, right? Isn't that right?
Yes, that's right. That's right. Williams with the higher pick, but those guys are both in the last years of their contract, so they need a future at that position. So, I mean, who knows? I mean, Max has not panned out as they planned. He has had a lot of injuries, and Nick Boyle they like. I mean, but he's just not. I mean, he's a blocker more than anything.
Yeah.
So who knows? But they had a need going forward, sort of organizationally. So they just addressed it.
This is a team where, unlike the Steelers, it feels like the Ravens have never. It's not a better or worse thing, but the Steelers 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, transitioned where the defense had always been the better side of the ball. And then, for the past 5 years, the offense has been the better side of the ball, unquestionably. For the Ravens, it's always been the defense has been the better side of the ball, it feels like. Looking at this unit, is this a good defensive unit? And which of the three levels do you feel like is the best?
Oh, well, that's a good question. I think I mean, the jury's out on the defense. The defense, excuse me, has put up some good numbers last year, pretty good numbers. They led the league in takeaways, but they also gave up leads left and right, late game leads, and that really was a shortcoming on that side of the ball. And of course, it cost them a trip to the playoffs. I mean, they were going until the last minute of 4th and 12th play. The Bengals, Dalton throws for a touchdown, and they're sitting at home. So the defense, they haven't changed a whole lot. All the starters from last year are back. So as far as you certainly look at it. I'd say this starting the season, there would be no doubt you would say the middle level is the one that is the most vulnerable because other than Mosley, they're really, that it was, Peanut Almasar and a rookie, Kenny Young. But Young has been kind of a revelation. Young may be, they may have really stolen one there in the 4th round. He led the team in tackles with Mosley out on Sunday. He's flying around to the ball. He's not an oversized guy. He's pretty small, but fast, and he's a playmaker, I think. And so they feel real good about that. So maybe the middle of the defense is okay. I feel. The back end they're kind of old at safety with Weddle, not very fast. I think that the secondary, especially without Jimmy Smith, can be passed on. I mean, Marlon Humphrey's a very solid young corner. He's going to be good. Brandon Carr, I have no doubt the Steelers will go after him, and probably as they have done before, and will again. And so, they're a little bit vulnerable there. I think that would be the biggest point of vulnerability, certainly for this game Sunday.
Obviously this will be we would think that this is the best offense that the Ravens will have faced up until this point of the season come Sunday night.
Yeah.
What is the narrative going to be if the Steelers come out and hang, 30 or 35 on the Ravens? We saw what the Bengals were able to do mostly in the first half of that game earlier in the season. And it looked like they did it quite flawlessly at that. What's going to be the narrative, basically with the fan base and with the writers if the Steelers come out there and hang, 30 or 40 burger on this defense?
The narrative will be same situation. Nothing's changed. The narrative will be they can't stop Ben. They can't stop Antonio Brown. They just can't do it. And they don't have – the narrative will be, well, they didn't have Jimmy Smith, who does a pretty good job on Brown, but he's suspended and not able to play. So that will be part of the narrative. But, that's an excuse. I mean, in the end, you have to figure out a way to do it. And so that will be the narrative, is that they still can't do it. And, that's the Ravens have to hope. There was the game in Baltimore last year. Le'Veon Bell had 35 carries, something like that. It really wasn't the passing game; it was the running game, and they were playing without Brandon Williams, I believe, and really took advantage of that. So I think they feel like they can probably hold up okay against the run with no Bell and Brandon Williams playing. But the passing game is something they haven't been able to stop really good passing offenses the last few years. And, are they any better back there? That's the question.
The Steelers'
and
offense.
It's a valid question.
Yeah, the Steelers' offense has and it's not shocking. They hit the field and they'll go 3 and out a couple of times. It seems like. Should they come out trying to throw against this Ravens defense Sunday night, or should look? James Conner hasn't had a bad start to the season, and you're right. We talked about this is an interesting game to look back at because last year in Week 4 was kind of the Le'Veon Bell. Where his season really turned around. He didn't have a great start to the 2017 season, but in Week 4, I think 144 rushing yards and another 30 or 40 yards through the air there. Do you try to come after this Ravens defense on the ground initially, or do you go after Carr?
I go after Carr. I throw the ball. Under the radar, the Ravens' rush defense has not been as stout as it is. And last year, they gave up the highest yard per carry average in franchise history. And one of the narratives here is that they paid Brandon Williams and they haven't really gotten their money's worth. Some of the fans think that. So, of course, the reality of the story is a little bit different. I mean, a lot of those yards have come sort of on the edges, more than in the middle of the field where Brandon Williams does plug things up pretty well. But last year there were some bad games for that run defense. So if I'm the Steelers, I check it out. I mean, certainly you watch what Cincinnati did. Cincinnati was able to run on them. So, and again, it's sort of on those, maybe out of the shotgun with sort of a delay to run pass option. They're finding some holes. So there's, there is the possibility of games being made on the ground, but I think until further proven, I would come out throwing. The Ravens couldn't stop them last year. Last seen in the fourth quarter of that game last year, they couldn't stop them. So why stop now?
Well, before I turn it over to Dave to close you out here, the specialist with Sam Cook and Tucker. I mean, these two have to be the best specialist tandem in the NFL. And does the Baltimore fan base take that for granted? I mean, I know you writers and all have seen it for quite a while there, but do you see what's going on in Pittsburgh with Barry and now Boswell having a little bit of issues there? I mean, these two in Cook and Tucker have to be the best specialists in the league, right?
I would think so. It's a huge thing here. Has been for years. I mean, and they had that. I mean, that was a key part of how they were even able to win any games the last few years without much offense. Is get within. If you get to the 40-yard line, you're in field goal range. And whether they're taken for granted, or probably so a little bit, but it's always a narrative here. Whenever there's a round of misses around the league, do you take? Harbaugh gets asked, how much do you love Justin Tucker? And everybody kind of laughs about it. Tucker's got a big ego, and they kind of kid him. But they do not take him for granted. I mean, it's a great thing. He continues to put two through. I think he's got 8 or 9 plus 50s in a row, and he's just money. And Sam Cook, sort of late in his career here, is getting a lot of love. People have sort of figured out he's pretty ingenious. He's got it down to a science. I mean, he'll give you 6 or 7 different kicks, and he's like a baseball pitcher with a lot of pitches, and so very, very, very much a part of what they do, how they try to win ball games. The Ravens, I'm talking about, is relying on those guys because they can flip the field and get 3 points when other teams can't, and it's just a huge thing.
That's a great analogy, John. I like that. And obviously, the Steelers special teams have really struggled here through the first 3 weeks. And Boswell's getting the attention because kickers get more attention. But Jordan Berry's really, really struggled. And the Steelers brought in a couple guys to have a punt off last week. And as you well know, when you bring in other guys, the incumbent rarely stays. But Berry did stay. And, he's got a reprieve at least for another week now. So we'll see how that goes. But all right, so let's get down to the brass tacks and pick a winner for us.
Pick a winner. I think this is I feel the Ravens winning this game. I feel like they've gone in there and these last couple games in Pittsburgh have been great games, back and forth games. The Steelers have pulled it out. And I feel like the Ravens are coming in a pretty good place. They feel like this is maybe a Pittsburgh team where they can put points on the board and really move the ball and score. The question is whether Baltimore can stop them. Rush the passer, rush Ben a little bit. I think they probably have just enough. I would say 28-24. No, let me change that. 30-28. 30-28 Ravens over Steelers.
I like it. Another high-scoring one. I think the Steelers are going to have a lot of those this year. For our listeners, once again, The League, how 5 rivals created the NFL and launched a sports empire. You can follow John at B. Eisenberg. Check his work out, Baltimore.com. It's John, it's always great to have you. And thanks again for your time.
My pleasure as always. Thank you.
Okay, Dave, John continues to be one of our favorite guys, and always fun to have him on. And what's interesting is how many beat writers we have on who pick against or pick for the team that they cover, and picking the Ravens to come into Heinz Field and get a victory, which they've done in the past.
Yeah, and look, I mean, is that overly surprising? Because they obviously know more, they think they know more about the team, and we would like to think that we know more about the Steelers and all like that. I don't know. I don't find it overly surprising, I guess, to have some opposing beat writers come in here and pick the team that they cover.
Yeah, well, we'll find out. We'll obviously be back on Friday. We'll have our picks and get into some more analysis about that. The latest on the injury. We'll have two, maybe 3 injury reports by the time we do it on Friday. So much better sense of exactly what the Steeler 46 will look like for that one.
Yeah, and some kind of late breaking news when it comes to that. It sounds like David DeCastro is going to try to practice today. So
I would love to look foolish on mine, possibly till the bye week.
So some good news when it comes to there. We'll see how he's able to make it through on the other side in there. So some late breaking news there when it comes to the Wednesday injury report. All right, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. You can follow David Todd on Twitter at David M. Todd. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast at gmail.com. If you like what we do and you want to donate to the cause, you can go to SteelersDepot.com, hit that donate button. You can either give a one-time donation or you can set up kind of a monthly donation, if you will. Several people have already done that. So if you want to go that route, certainly appreciate it. Also, if you'd like a 1-year ad-free subscription, if you will, to Steelers Depot. We have those available for $25. Go to SteelersDepot.com. Hit ad-free in the upper right navigational bar. That's right next to the donate button as well, too. So there you go. And, David, we'll get after it on Friday and preview this game pretty good.
As always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Dave.